I'm Amber Horvath, and today I'm presenting Understanding How Programmers Can Use Annotations on Documentation. API documentation is notoriously problematic, and a large body of software engineering research has uncovered specific issues, including incorrect, poorly organized, and not useful information. In our work, we explore to what extent annotations may be used to address documentation issues while supporting developers' learning. Annotation authors can keep track of their thoughts, insights, and questions in context, and future readers can leverage their learning. Our work had 3 phases: 2 formative studies followed by the development of Adamite, our annotation tool, and then a 2-pass lab study to investigate how Adamite helps with documentation issues. We ran a preliminary study where people learned an unfamiliar API while using Hypothesis, an annotation browser extension. The study had 2 phases, where the first phase had participants create annotations, and the second phase had participants reading annotations created by the first author. We found that participants created annotations that were related to what they were trying to complete in the study, along with open questions and to-do items. However, Hypothesis has no way of easily following up on these annotations, informing our design of Adamite. To supplement our preliminary study, we queried Hypothesis' API to get a list of public annotations developers have made on documentation. We found developers made nearly 2,000 public annotations, which shows that people are willing to create annotations. The annotations were short in length and included questions, to-do items, and issues, and we suspect they could be beneficial to other users with more tooling support. For example, an annotator had a question in one annotation, then made another annotation pointing out the answer to their original question. Hypothesis does not allow users to connect these annotations. We use these findings to motivate our own tool, Adamite, and its collection of documentation features, as seen in the following demonstration. When learning a new API, developers have many questions and hypotheses and may take notes on what they are thinking. With Adamite, these notes can be annotations shown in the context of the documentation. To create an annotation, the developer first highlights some text on the page, then chooses which annotation type they want their annotation to be. Each annotation type has a purpose for supporting developers' documentation needs. The normal type of annotation is general purpose and can be used for any sort of note the developer wants to take. Highlights create an annotation with just an anchor and no additional content. To-dos are for items the developer wants to follow up on, a common form of developer note. Questions are for open questions the developer has about the documentation's content, with 2 predefined questions the user can select. Issues are for identifying problems that the developer encounters in the documentation. In our study, multiple participants annotated that the first code example needs to be changed in order to work in their code, so let's make that annotation. When we create an annotation, the sidebar updates to show our new annotation, including the anchor and a rich text editor for adding content. The developer can also add tags, change the annotation type, and decide whether to post the annotation publicly, privately, or if they are in a group, to that group. Let's tell future users of the documentation that they need to change the ID. When we publish the annotation, the sidebar loads with the new annotation and the text is highlighted on the web page in light green. Clicking on the highlight on the page will scroll to the annotation in the list. Conversely, clicking on the anchor icon on the annotation will scroll to that part of the page. Anchors are useful for contextualizing documentation to a developer's specific needs through creating connections. Adamite supports multiple anchors, such that each annotation can be attached in multiple places in which it is relevant to the author. A user can add an anchor by highlighting some text on the page and clicking the anchor button on the top right corner of the annotation that they want to add the anchor to. These 2 annotations show how multiple anchors were used by our participants. The first annotation uses multiple anchors to connect 2 code examples. The second annotation is an issue annotation, as the participant got stuck because this information was not presented together. Issue annotations have a flag for expert review button, which could alert key stakeholders such as documentation writers that the documentation may have an issue they can address. Since developers have many questions about documentation, we support question annotations for keeping track of and eventually answering these questions. One participant wondered, "What is this?" about the SRC property. At a later point in the study, they found the part of the documentation that provided the answer, so they added a reply with an anchor to there. All other types of annotations also have replies such that developers can follow up on the annotation content. Annotations, which the user wants to keep around, such as questions and to-dos, can also be pinned so that they always stay at the top of the sidebar. In order to understand the role that Adamite plays in developers' documentation usage, we ran a lab study with 3 conditions where participants completed an API learning task comprised of 4 steps. Participants in the authoring condition created annotations, and participants in the reading condition read these annotations. The control condition had participants use just the documentation. We objectively graded each participant on whether they succeeded in completing each of the 4 steps. In the Adamite conditions, we counted how often participants interacted with Adamite's features in the annotations. We qualitatively coded normal, issue, and question annotations dependent upon their content, and selected the non-redundant annotations to include in the reading condition. In the reading condition, we counted and ranked annotations by how often participants stated the annotation was helpful or not. Participants in the reading condition did significantly better in completing the task than participants in the authoring or control conditions. There is no statistically significant difference between the control and authoring conditions, so annotating did not impact annotation author's ability to complete the task. Many of the annotations reminded the author about important details of the API. These annotations are primarily beneficial to the author, and all participants made at least one annotation specifically for themselves. These notes were short and commonly revisited, suggesting that annotating is lightweight and effective for keeping track of insights for the original author. Some of these annotations were also used in conjunction with Adamite's novel features, such as multiple anchors and pins, suggesting that Adamite's features help make annotating more effective. Poor code examples were the most frequently identified issue, with some code examples not working because they cannot be copy-pasted. Some of the copy-paste problems happened because the variable the code example referenced was defined in a different part of the documentation. One participant used multiple anchors to link together these parts to solve the issue. This annotation later helped 2 participants in the reading condition figure out why their code example didn't work, suggesting annotating can solve some documentation issues. Participants in the reading condition read, on average, 23.7 annotations and found 45% of the annotations that they encountered helpful, and only 8% not helpful. The most helpful annotation identified the part of the API needed to complete the second step of the task. The second most helpful annotation succeeded in explaining how to do the third step of the task by using multiple anchors to clarify a code example. In the reading condition, participants were more successful in completing these 2 challenging steps, suggesting that participants were able to use what the authoring participants learned in order to more effectively complete the task. Thank you.